In the last section, we finally got a campaign to appear on the screen. Right now, we only have one campaign tied to our factory, but we will eventually go back and create more campaigns so we can see a full list eventually develop here. Remember, we wrote out that render campaigns function to assume that we have multiple campaigns. So as we start to add more, we should definitely automatically see them appear on the screen. We'll eventually add those campaigns, but for right now, I want to continue working on the campaign index component. Let's go and take a look at our mockup really quickly. So back over here, all right, well, we've kind of got this part done. So let's start working on the right-hand side, which is where we should show a big button that says Create Campaign. So a user should be able to click this to go to a page where they will make a new campaign. Rather than creating a button manually ourselves and adding in some CSS and styling to it, we will instead again use the Semantic UI React package to create a button for us. So let's go and look up some documentation on how to make a button. Back over here, I'll find the Elements section. Underneath that is the Button section. I can scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to look for a section that says Icon with Label. So right around here, Labeled Icon. I think that this would be a pretty good component to use to show a user a button to go and create a new campaign. I think that we should put an icon with like a little plus or something so that the user understands that they can click this to add something to the application. Let's again expand this little code section to see what's going on. Now notice that there are two code sections here if you're following along in the documentation. So there's like this first section and then a second one right here. The first section shows kind of like a long form way of creating a button with an icon. So this long form way is to create a button component and place an icon component inside that. But we don't really want to use the long form way because there's a shorthand way. And in general, we always like using the shorthand or more compact form. So with this approach, we can use a button component. We can pass in a content property, and that will be used as the text, and then the name of an icon to use. Semantic UI ships with a collection of different icons that are automatically included. So all we have to do is use the correct name of an icon, and Semantic UI will automatically place that icon inside the button. I'll eventually show you where you can get a list of all these different icons, but we'll come back to that in a little bit. So I'm going to go back over to my code editor, and we're going to start to add this button in. I'll start off by going to the very top, where we are going to add an import statement for the button component in addition to the card one. I'll then go back down to my render method. And right after we render out our list of campaigns, I'll place the button. Now I expect there to be a couple different properties that we're going to assign to this. So you'll notice that I'm going to make a self-closing tag that spans a couple of different lines. Then inside of here, we'll first start off by specifying the content property. So for content, we're going to say that this thing should say something like, I don't know, create campaign. I think that works. Next, we'll specify the icon property. So this is the icon that we want to use inside the button. Like I said, there is a collection of very specific icon names that we can look up inside the documentation. So we can know exactly which icon we're trying to add here. Now I've already gone and looked up the appropriate icon name. The one that we are going to use is add space circle. So that's going to make a little plus symbol with a circle around it. And it's going to essentially look like a button that you can click on to add something, more or less. We're going to add one additional property to this thing. We're going to add on just the text primary. So if you are a little bit newer to React, just so you know, you don't always have to specify props by providing the property name and then saying equals something. If you are trying to pass in a property with a value of true assigned to it, like that, you can do a little shorthand abbreviation by just listing out the property name. So by saying primary like this, it automatically gets expanded to be primary equals true. So let's really quickly look up the documentation for what this primary flag does. If I go back over here, I can scroll up a little bit and we'll see a good example of that primary property. So under emphasis right here, by adding on property, by adding on primary, all it does is add some nice blue styling to the button. adding a campaign is definitely like a primary action inside of our application. So yeah, I think using primary right here is a very reasonable way of styling the button. Okay, so let's go back down. I just want to make sure we got all of our markup right. So yeah, I think we got everything. The label position, I believe, is a optional property that kind of positions the label on either the left-hand side or the right-hand side of the button. It is optional, so let's try not adding it right now, and we'll just see what happens, and if we need to add it, we'll come back and do it. All right, so I'm going to go and make sure that I've saved my index.js file. I'll then go back over to my browser, and sure enough, it looks like we get our campaign to appear, or the button to appear. Now you'll notice that by default, it has the nice kind of like circle plus icon button right there. If we want to try a slightly different icon, we could always change the icon to instead be just like add. So if I now save this, we'll get a nice little plus right there. So you can go with either icon, it's totally up to you. And like I said, in just a little bit, I'll show you where you can reference a list of all the different icons we use. So you can change it further if you want to. But I'm going to leave mine as add circle. And okay, so that looks good. All right. Well, we definitely have the button showing up here, but you'll recall that inside of our mockup, we had really wanted to see that button appear on the right-hand side of the screen. So I think we still have a little bit of work to do there. We're not going to accomplish this just yet. There's one or two other quick things I want to do inside this component, but we'll take a pause right here and we'll continue with that in the next video, and then eventually we'll come back and make sure this thing moves over to the right-hand side. So quick break, and I'll see you in just a minute.